Daytime retail operates on crowd logic. Hundreds of people cycle through a business, creating a self-policing rhythm. But at 3 a.m., that ecosystem evaporates. You are left with a psychological vacuum. There is no manager in the back office. There are no regular customers browsing the aisles. There isn't even daylight to signal normal waking hours. Most overnight workers adapt to this by establishing a quiet routine. They sit behind the counter, catch up on paperwork, check the cameras, or just wait in the silence for the hours to pass. But the darkness alters the rules of engagement. Without a daytime crowd to enforce social norms, every single stranger who walks through the front door forces the isolated solo worker to act as a real-time threat assessor. This isolation draws in a specific kind of calculated attention. When someone enters this space with intent, their approach often mirrors a pattern, a series of escalations that starts long before a word is ever spoken. It begins with a simple presence. In a space designed for brief, purposeful transactions, a person becomes a ghost customer, someone who occupies the space not to buy, but to watch. Consider a recent shift for a 22-year-old gas station clerk. For 2 hours, she worked near the back of the store, unaware that a brand-new, unplated Subaru, and later a second identical vehicle, were sitting perfectly still in her parking lot, just out of her sightline. This chart shows the physical architecture of a standard 24-hour business and how it favors an outside observer. From the register, a worker has a severely restricted line of sight, leaving massive dark zones around the perimeter. The drivers of those 2 vehicles positioned themselves directly inside those blind spots. Their observation was only foiled because late-night customers happened to hang around the lot to smoke and walk a dog, spooking the drivers into leaving. This kind of spatial mapping happens indoors, too. Take the case of a clerk working the night shift at a quiet 3-story roadside motel. A man checked in near midnight using a stolen credit card, but he never went to his room. Instead, he walked past the desk and sat in the dim lounge area, staring straight ahead at a powered-off television screen for over 30 minutes. He wasn't resting. As the night dragged on, he continually repositioned himself, standing at the end of hallways, waiting in stairwells, and lurking near vending machines. He was studying the clerk's movement patterns and mapping the lobby's camera blind spots. This initial observation relies on the worker assuming the intruder is just exhibiting harmless eccentricity. By the time the clerk realizes they are the subject of study, the observer has already gathered the data they need. After the watching comes the testing. The intruder shifts his approach, becoming an active presence, probing the worker's defenses. A woman named Meredith worked alone at an isolated gas station, sometimes buying water, sometimes just sitting in his dark car at the edge of the lot, watching the building. Paul eventually began to verbalize his surveillance. He casually pointed to a whiteboard behind the counter and complimented her handwriting, noting that she used highly specific little slashes instead of dots on her eyes. During a later visit, when Meredith asked him to leave, he responded by asking if she'd be more comfortable if he pretended he didn't notice that her shoes were always a half size too big. Then came the final probe. Paul calmly mentioned she was smart to keep the back room locked, and that he noticed she checked that door at exactly 2 a.m., almost every single night. These comments were not just idle chatter. They were calculated psychological strikes designed to show the isolated worker that her daily routines were entirely and completely transparent, and her physical defenses were being monitored in real time. The final escalation is the most visceral. It's the moment the perceived safety of a counter or a locked door is revealed to be a total illusion. Daniel worked the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift at a small, family-owned motel. He took the job specifically because the building was almost totally empty at night. On a cold Tuesday night around 2 a.m., the bell on the front desk rang. Daniel walked out from the back office, but the lobby was completely empty. 10 minutes later, it rang again. Still, no one was there. Thinking it was just a prankster, Daniel decided to sit in the chair right behind the front desk. He dimmed the lobby lights and waited in the silence, listening to the clock tick, assuming whoever was messing with him had given up. Just as he started to relax, the bell rang a 3rd time. A pale hand reached up from directly underneath the front desk and pressed the metal bell right in front of him. The man had been there the entire time. He had crawled on his hands and knees behind the desk, wedging himself into a tiny gap by Daniel's feet, while the clerk sat just inches away. The perceived perimeter between the public space and the workers' safe zone had already been shattered. When police eventually arrested Paul at the gas station, they searched his car. They found a notepad packed with shift schedules, lists of Meredith's groceries, and pages where her name was written repeatedly until the ink bled through the paper. These encounters leave permanent psychological marks. Workers alter their daily routes, request transfers to entirely different towns, or abandon the night shift completely, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. These stories expose a harsh truth. The heavy wood of a front desk, the glowing camera monitors, even the company name tag, they all offer a sense of security that doesn't actually exist when the building is empty. The architecture of commerce relies on a daytime social contract, the assumption that people enter, buy something, and leave. But when the sun goes down, that contract disappears. In the vacuum of the night shift, survival rarely comes down to corporate security protocols. It relies on hypervigilance, trusting your instincts, and the terrifying reality of sheer random luck.